Hello and welcome to the Brotherhood of Kings podcast, where we celebrate the brilliance, resilience, and power of Black men. And we empower them to shatter stereotypes, embrace their greatness, and create extraordinary lives. I'm your host, Coach Michael Taylor. And joining me today is Frank Love, a distinguished author, speaker, podcaster, and relationship coach. Frank is renowned for his insightful perspectives on building and sustaining loving relationships. He's the author of Relationship Conversations You Don't Want to Have, but Should Anyway, and 25 Ways to Be Loving. He has degrees from Howard and the George Washington University, and he combines academic knowledge with real life experience, including navigating the complexities of divorce and cultivating a fulfilling marriage. So, hello, Frank. How are you?
I am absolutely great. How are you?
Fantastic. And as we were talking earlier, it always excites me when I see other brothers talking about things like relationships. So when I ran across your stuff on Instagram, I said, I need to check this brother out and get him on my podcast so you can drop some wisdom for the brothers. And again, the intention here is I like to just think of it as a black male empowerment conversation. And again, I think it's important that we as Black men have specific conversations around relationships because that's something we don't generally do. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation. And I want to begin by asking, so what percentage of your clients are Black men? Because as a life coach, I know how difficult it can be to get Black men engaged in this kind of work. So I'm just curious, what percentage would you say of your clients are Black men?
Those that I would consider truly engaged, about 30%.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Well, that's good. Actually a good number because when I first started this, I would say mine would be around five, maybe.
Wow.
The majority of people that were buying my books were not Black men.
Mhm.
And it is just something that I've really been committed to for the last 20, 25 years. And once again, that's why I'm so excited to have you as part of this podcast because we need to collaborate. We need to continue this conversation. So I am curious. Again, I've been doing this for some 25 years. So do you believe Black men now are actually more open to having these types of conversations about relationships versus, say, 5, 10 years ago?
I suspect we are. Not in huge numbers, but I think we're a little bit more open.
Okay.
I do.
Okay.
I think just the prevalence of YouTube, social media, the groups that have come about, I think it's opened the doorway some. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Yeah, because again, let me preface this by saying I'm an optimist. That's the lens through which I see the world, and I'm really excited and optimistic about the future because I started writing books for Black men back in the 90s,
Mhm.
and that was before the internet was a thing.
Yeah.
And I wrote a book called Brothers Are You Listening? A Success Guide for the 90s. And the intention was to engage brothers in a conversation about emotional well-being, mindset, things like that. And as I look back between now and then, I see a huge shift. The fact that we're even having this conversation confirms for me that Black men are more open. We just have to continue the conversation. So, before we jump into your work, though, I'm curious. Before you were a relationship coach, what were you doing?
Whew, I was a fundraiser. Primarily, that's the easy. I was a fundraiser for my alma mater, one of them. I also ran a national health organization, the DC chapter, and finally I worked for the city, DC. I did a year under Mayor Anthony Williams, where I was a representative, his representative in some cases in Ward 8, one of the 8 wards in DC.
Okay. So I have come to believe and to know that there are really only two things that will cause a man to want to change. Okay. One is pain, and the other is what I call divine discontent, which is just that inner feeling, that inner knowing that something's just off. We may not know exactly what it is. Something just seems to be off. So, what was it that triggered you to begin your transformational journey and to start focusing on relationships?
You know, I don't know if it was one particular thing. I mean, I'll just tell you today's version of my story. It may
Okay.
change, it may be different tomorrow. I grew up, I grew up around a lot of different types of relationships. I grew up, my parents divorced, my father remarried, and then my father and stepmother had two children who are my baby sisters. So I've got one sister with my mother and my father, and then I have two baby sisters with my father and my stepmother at the time. That was I learned a lot watching that relationship. And then I was in a community. I really grew up in a beautiful community, even a beautifully flawed community. There was a lot going on. There were a lot of mistakes made, but there was a lot of love and there was a lot of community. Fast forward, time for me to get married, and I got married when I was 26. Had my daughter at that age, and it was wow, it was a tough marriage. And I say to you and your audience the same way I say to really anybody I'm in front of when I'm speaking publicly, is I wasn't a good husband to my first wife. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And the biggest challenge that I could not get over was just I was insensitive. Um, I had some hard conversations up front, and you check the name of my book, the relationship conversations you don't want to have, but should anyway. So I believed in having hard conversations. I was fine with it. I was fine with what came after it, but I I wasn't prepared for the emotions that that came up with having hard conversations. So that part of it I wasn't prepared for that comes after it. And I after some time I really got an opportunity to take a look at myself, because just because you tell someone how you intend to engage and they agree doesn't mean that there's not going to be hard times, or they're not going to have challenges along the way. And we can't ignore that. We can't ignore what they're going through. We can't act like that's your problem, that's not my problem. Because when we act like that's your problem and that's not my problem, they tend to do more to make it your problem.
Yeah.
um, and that's kind of the short version of that. But that, and then coming into my current marriage, I just saw so many opportunities, and a genuine belief that the the change and the growth starts when I take a look at me. I truly believe that I am the captain of the ship called my life, and that everything that happens in my life is a result of me and my efforts or lack thereof. I truly believe that it's on me. And I got to peel back so many different layers and have so many conversations, and I'm still having the conversations with and part of the work that I do with helping individuals, what I call create a loving culture in their relationship, is to inspire you to inspire me. Like I'm the last to say I've got it down pat. I am not that guy who can say that. But I can say that I can I can I can have a powerful conversation with you. I can share my thoughts, insight, and go back and forth with you, and I can hold you accountable, and I can feel good about you holding me accountable. And so that's a little bit of my journey. I want to hold you accountable. I want you to hold me accountable. And we start by, I often start by running my mouth about a topic or another. You could check out one of my blogs or videos, and we go from there. But I'm not a master at having everything that I talk about down. I am I'm training. I'm in the gym. I'm in the gym with you.
Yeah, and I appreciate that honesty because as an author of 16 books and a coach and all of that, I don't claim to be an expert per se. I'm just a guy that's trying to figure out how to make my life work. And so I share insights to support other men in doing just that, making their life work. And I think that's what's unique about what you and I are doing. So we're not, claiming we're Oprah Winfrey or anybody, that we have all the answers to your problems, but we're engaging men in conversations about transforming their lives. And with that being said, I think this is a great jumping point. And we'll start with what you just mentioned. The first time we get married, we're going to make mistakes. For me, my greatest challenge in my first marriage, like yourself, I've been through a divorce, and now I've been happily married for the past 23 years. But what I know now, first and foremost, I got married for all the wrong reasons.
Mm.
Number one, I was too young. I was only 21 when I got married, and I was climbing the corporate ladder. So I thought that, being married would make me look more mature and might improve my chances of getting promoted, and just the wrong reasons. But the biggest challenge I had in my first marriage was not understanding what it means to be emotionally available in relationships. I had no idea what the heck that meant. And so after my divorce, I really struggled with relationships, and I noticed this really amazing pattern. And that pattern was I would date a woman and the relationship would last 3 to 4 weeks tops. And then the women were all saying the same thing as they left. I care too much about you to stay in this relationship, which made no sense to me at the time. And then they would say, the reason that I'm leaving is because you're emotionally unavailable. And that didn't make any sense to me, because to me, I was a nice guy, I believed in monogamy, not bad looking, good body and all that, but I didn't know what they meant. So after several failed relationships after my marriage, I realized that something had to change. And then I received the miracle, Frank. This is the miracle. I was having a pity party with a female friend of mine. And I was saying something like, you women all say you want a good man, but when a good man show up, why y'all always leaving? And she looked at me. She said, Michael, you want to know the truth? I said, yeah. She said, can you handle the truth? I said, yeah. She says, well, if one person calls you a jackass, you probably shouldn't worry about it. But if two or more do, you might want to get a saddle. she said, have you not noticed that you're the only common denominator in all of your relationships?
Yeah.
And when she said that, the light bulb came on, and I realized that it was about me. I
Yeah.
needed to figure out what it was about me that was keeping me from creating great relationships. And so that's kind of how my journey began. So I want to kind of dive in a little bit.
Can I ask a few clarifying questions?
Sure.
How long were you married the first time?
Six
I
and a
was
half
married
years.
almost 10 years. What'd you say?
6.5 years.
6.5. Any children?
Yes, three children.
All right. I had
One,
two.
one, one was hers, and we had two together.
Okay. All right. So I had two in my first marriage and three in my second. Huh.
Okay.
We seem to be right there. Right there with each other. Oh,
Gotcha.
yeah.
So again, with that being said, let's talk about some of the lessons you and I both learned from our first marriage that has now allowed us to create great relationships. So what were some of the lessons you learned about you from your first marriage that makes your second one so much better?
Hmm. Okay. The well, I've touched on a few of them. One was the insensitivity. And it's really important to be sensitive to what our partners are going through. And it's not even even if you have told them whatever. If you say to your wife, I'm gonna be home late tonight, um, and you come home late and she's upset, to have the attitude of, look, I told you I was gonna be home late. I told you I'd be home at 10. I'm walking in at 10. Leave me alone. That's insensitive. And that's one of those things that I was able to extract upon reflection, where we get to really ask ourselves, what's my partner going through? What's my wife going through? And logic is not going to get us there. It's not about I told you and you knew, leave me alone. It's more like I told you, I thought I thought we were communicating effectively. Something went wrong. Something's not working. What's not working? I care about you. I care what's going on with you. Let me touch your hand. Let me touch your head. Let me hold you. What would you like to see happen right now, given that you're upset about me coming home late? It's a different type of engagement that I've become aware of. That's easily one of them. And that's not an easy thing to do, to kind of de-escalate a situation, to care about someone when they're angry at you, or when they're yelling at you, or when you thought you were doing the right thing, when you thought you were logical, and when you think that they're being illogical. It's not easy to be emotionally caring to that individual, but it's very important.
Yeah. Now, you hit on something that, in my experience, is the foundation of why so many relationships fail. Now, you use the term sensitivity. And in order to be sensitive as a man, it's important that you understand and are able to express how you feel. Sensitivity is the result of feeling, connection. If we know how we feel and if we know how our partners feel, we can communicate at a whole different level. You can't do it in your head. You got to do it from your heart. So being sensitive means I'm willing, I'm able to have empathy, to understand what you're feeling. And that's the thing that trips a lot of men up. And I would say most men up, because I wrote a book called A New Conversation with Men. And in that book, I identify what I call the 5 illusions of manhood. And the first illusion is, to be a man, you must be non emotional and disconnected.
Mhm.
And this is what trips a lot of men up, because we are conditioned to believe that feelings are for women. And we don't want to feel, we don't want to express how we feel because we don't want to appear weak.
Mhm.
And so, would you tie that into when you say being sensitive?
Okay. The sensitivity that I'm really referencing is in some ways listening and connecting past the words.
Okay.
I was a word guy. I am a word guy. I'm listening to what you're saying. I care about what you're saying and the way you're saying it. And there's a part of my brain that is able to debate and is able to analyze and that sort of thing. That is not always relationship friendly. That can be very frustrating to our partners because they may not be as good at debating as us. They may not be good at analyzing or going back and forth, but yet they've got these feelings that they clearly care about and that are important to them and that are important to us, presumably. That and those it's important to find out what is actually going on, what's really being communicated that's not without the words. And I mean, what can I say? I wasn't that guy. I was stuck on the words. And I still get stuck on the words sometimes. But I do know that there's a difference and there's a way to get, it's important to get past the words. And sometimes it has nothing to do with what's being said at all. Sometimes it's You can see the irritation or pain. And sometimes, get this, sometimes it doesn't even have anything to do with you. That's the real kicker.
Yeah.
Sometimes it has to do with their mother and father, their the way they grew up, the histories. It's all of that can be what we determine or decide or work to tune into, and not just simply the words. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
absolutely. And again, I think the challenge we have, especially as men, is we're good at being logical. We're good at being stuck in our heads trying to figure out how to communicate. But you can't have authentic connection
Yeah,
without feeling.
yeah.
And it's again, it's not about the words as much as the energy or the feeling that's being expressed. So, for
Mhm.
example, if I say I'm coming in late, or I tell you that I'm coming in late, I show up and I'm being insensitive because I said, I told you I was coming late. Well, the feeling is I may be feeling angry that you didn't respect the fact that I told you I was going to be late. But at the same time, she's probably hurt or scared because you are not knowing what you were doing, why you were out or something. But it really comes back to what's the feeling that's generating the communication. And so once again, the challenge for us as men is to learn how to get out of our head, get into our hearts, and to have empathy, to
Yeah,
empathize with that person. So, for example, if I came home late and I don't want to just be right because I said I was going to be late and I'm late, but I want to say, okay, baby, I'm trying to get to what's the feeling? Why are you feeling this way?
yeah,
And if we can do that, then we can shift the energy. Then we can shift everything and create that connection versus defensiveness.
yes. We hope we can. And that raises an interesting point where as men, we get to be sensitive at times and deal with them being insensitive. Like, it is possible we can be sensitive to what they're going through and they are not sensitive to what we're going through. And it becomes a long-term investment where we get to de-escalate and just de-escalate. And there's no immediate payoff. The payoff may come 5 years later when they realize they cannot press your button or that you are not reacting negatively, and they somehow begin to just appreciate it instead of being irritated by your calmness, or instead of being irritated by not being able to press your button. Uh, and all of this to say, I'm suggesting that we be sensitive, but also astute enough to know that our partners may not be sensitive to us. Now, that's a mouthful, and it's not necessarily fun. It's not necessarily a pleasant experience. But that patience that we get to bring when our partners are not necessarily patient with us is it's an investment. And
Absolutely. Yeah,
sometimes it
and
takes a while.
that's what the work is about. When I mention the work, I'm talking about us being willing to be self-reflective,
Yes.
us to be willing to check in and see what's going on with us so that as we're communicating, we're number one, taking responsibility for how we feel first, but then being able to be sensitive to how they feel. But the challenge here is, and I think this is kind of what you alluded to, is that as men, we generally get blamed for most problems in relationships, but women have issues too. And so sometimes they may, as you mentioned earlier, have some trauma stuff that hadn't been dealt with, and they're taking that on us.
Yep.
I know that after my divorce, and I started doing all this inner work. I remember dating a black woman once, and she made some comment about I've been hanging around white people too much because I was talking about vulnerability, talking about, her being open and honest about what was going on with her. And she didn't understand that deep level of communicating. So you have to be careful as a man who's doing his inner work. If you engage with women who haven't done any work, it can be a nightmare. Right?
Absolutely.
It can be a nightmare.
And,
So
and it, so in the dating process, it's important that we're not just being the ones vetted.
yeah,
We're vetting them too.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's for
yeah.
sure. So
Everybody isn't going to be a great partner.
so let's dive into that a little bit because again, I believe the key in a relationship is vulnerability. And I know for a lot of men, that's a big word, and a lot of men aren't comfortable with that word and what that really means. So, how would you define or describe what it means to be vulnerable as a man?
Vulnerability is a willingness to be flawed and have no problem or to have minimal problems, or work to decrease the problems that we have showing it. It's it's in some ways it's the willingness to let her come in the bathroom after you leave and smell smell what the aroma that you left. And it's the same for her. It's the willingness to look stupid in front of our partners, or do what we think will lead us to look stupid. It's the willingness to just simply to stink, uh, to snore, to share our opinion that may or may not be politically correct. It's a willingness to do all of that. That's an encapsulation of vulnerability as I see it. But it's
And
also, I left one piece out. It's also the training. It's really, I use this analogy where when we go into the boxing gym, if you're if you're a trainer, if you're training in the boxing gym, we get to, if you're a good fighter, if you want to be a good boxer, then a good boxer is going to appreciate a good training partner. They're going to appreciate a good hit, because that's going to require that we, number one, understand that we don't want to get hit like that again, and then ask the question, how can I avoid that? What just happened? How can I avoid getting hit with that punch again? What can I do so that, yeah, that doesn't happen again? That's vulnerable. And it's training. It's being a student. We get to be a student to relationships and to ourselves, to our partners, but we get to just have the student hat on at all times where we're learning. And you've touched on that quite a bit.
yeah, and it comes down to you mentioned trainer or training, but it's really about the willingness to be coached, the
Yes.
willingness to
Yes.
learn something maybe we don't know.
Yes.
That's a form of vulnerability because
Yes.
as men we think we know it all,
Yes.
and when it comes to relationships, most of us don't. So it is important. It is important for us to be willing to be vulnerable, saying I don't know, you know, and that leads me to the next question or the next comment. Another piece that creates great relationships is intimacy. And for a lot of men, when you say intimacy, that what comes to mind is sex. And intimacy does not necessarily have anything to do with sex. So can you touch a little bit on your perception of what is intimacy and
Intimacy.
how do you get it?
Well, I see intimacy as is it's really care. It's a willingness to be in a place of, I care about you. I care about what you're going through. I care about how to connect with you. And that includes time. And I mean, unrushed time where you can actually have my time. You can, there's the book, The Five Love Languages, and I can only remember four at a given period of time. Um, Physical touch, gifts, acts of service, Um,
Words of affirmation,
okay, words of affirmation. Yeah. So
quality time.
yeah, I actually interviewed Dr. Chapman about 10 years ago, on my podcast, and he's great. Now, the thing about all of those um, love languages is they all, to do a good job with them, they all require time, and they're forms of intimacy, you know. But they require time. We get to settle ourselves and invest in our partners, and with a complete understanding is I'm doing this because I am committed to taking care of you. That's that's being intimate. That's and another piece of the intimacy, which we already talked about, is being vulnerable.
Yep.
That's being that's being intimate. And the thing about the vulnerability being a form of intimacy is when we're vulnerable, we give our partner permission to be vulnerable.
Yes.
And it can become something truly beautiful. And when we're not, we're putting up walls, and we give our partners justification to put up walls if they so need those justifications. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you think about vulnerability and intimacy and the foundation of it all could probably be boiled down to the word trust. Can you talk about the importance of having trust in relationships?
You know, trust is one of those. I use trust in a different way than most do.
Okay.
I really believe we know who our partners are from a very early stage. When we don't, we have ignored some things. I believe that we're going to pay. We're always going to pay. We may pay early or we may pay late, but we're going to pay. I am a proponent of paying early, taking your time, seeing your partner as you are in the dating phase in different situations, and see different dispositions and how different things, how they respond and react. And what I see, I trust. Maya Angelou said something to the effect of, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. To me, that's trust. That's just simply, well, that's that's trusting a person, what you know of that person is really trusting what you know of that person. Now, I take that and I take this I'm gonna take it in a slightly different direction. Once you know who your partner is, just love them. Just love them. I have a piece that I share with my wife and that I've shared with her for now decades, where I say, I'm with you no matter what. It's just, it's not, you don't have to do anything in particular. You don't have to not do anything in particular. I'm with you because I love you and I'm your husband and you're my wife. That's it. I know who you are and I know who my wife is. In her good and bad days, I know who she is. Um, and so my take on trust tends to be a little different than others, a lot of others. However, the trust for me is to just trust and that I know my wife, and then to accept her. That doesn't mean everything feels good. It doesn't mean I'm happy all the time, but it does mean that I'm her husband all the time. And she's always my wife and she's always my partner. And there's never a threat to leave because she did whatever. It just, I'm with you, period. So my take on trust is a bit different. I get that.
Well, I mean, for me, I hear you because I, like yourself, I am so committed to my wife, and she knows that. So there's never a thought, and I can only speak for myself, I can't speak for her, but there's
Mhm.
never a thought in my mind that I ever have to worry about my wife cheating on me or leaving me or anything. That's just not even part of the conversation because we are so connected. I guess that's the best way to explain it. So connected. There's this level of trust. There's this level of vulnerability. There's this level of connection that, you know, we use the term she's my ride or die. Yeah, that's what she is. She's my ride. She is there. She would walk to the ends of the earth for me, and I would do the same. And
Beautiful.
so I think it's important for us as Black men to be okay with saying that, to be okay to say that, I absolutely adore my wife because I do. And yet I know a lot of men, especially when you start talking about marriage, you hear things like, "Oh, she's my old ball and chain," or I mean, when you talk about the marriage, it's in a negative context, and I
Yeah.
think relationships shouldn't be that way. Relationships should be fun and rewarding and fulfilling, but we have to be willing to do the work to get there. And so that kind of leads me to my next question or point is I believe you can not fully love another unless you fully love yourself. So, what role does self-love, especially for Black men, what role does self-love play in our ability to create great relationships?
Self-love goes to the point that we've already kind of discussed around vulnerability. When we are aware of our frailties, our challenges, our issues, and we love ourselves anyway, and we understand that just we're simply in the gym. We're simply training right now, and tomorrow will be a better day. That is that's self-love. Now, the way that is beneficial to a relationship is if we know we're training, we also know and how vulnerable or frail we may feel or discombobulated, we also get to know that our partner is dealing with the same thing. They're in the gym too. They're trying to figure it out. They are also feeling vulnerable, frail, sensitive. And it's when we see someone else experiencing something that we're experiencing, that's when we get to say, ah, I know how that feels. Okay, all right, let's let's just take care of each other. Let me, you know, I will I could use a shoulder to lie on, a lap to lay in, and given how I want to lay my head in your lap, I suspect you want to lay your head in mine sometimes too. And so let's make sure we're giving that to each other. And I think that is the beauty and the relationship for self-love and how it contributes to a beautiful relationship.
Yeah. So, what are some of the common misconceptions about love and relationships that most people have, especially as men? I know that there's this misconception that, love is just, oh, it's just this feeling that I just love this person so much and that's going to make my relationship work. So, in your opinion, what are some of the misconceptions people have about relationships?
Oh man. One is that love is a feeling and that instead love is a love is an action that we get to take at every moment. We get to ask ourselves at every moment, what's the loving thing to do right now? That is a big misconception. That's a big missed opportunity for many of us. So, number one, love is an action, and it gets to show and how we deal with our partners at all times. You know, another is frustration being about the other person. No, frustration is, and this is my thing that I've grown clear about over the years. Frustration is God's way of telling us that we're not prepared to deal with something.
Mm,
And I am clear that if I'm not prepared to deal with something, I got some work to do. I got some training to do. I got some questions to ask. I got some reading to do. It's about the work that I get to do. And most of us think we're frustrated and we get to tell our partner how to alleviate our frustration. That might work for some people. That's not my come from. My come from is if I'm frustrated, there's work for me to do, and with a smile on my face. And I get to do all that I can to accept my partner because something is triggering me. When I'm frustrated, something's triggering me. Something in my history, something in my general disposition, which is probably related to my history. And I get to work on that, all of that. I get to work through it, work on it. It's gym time. It's time for me to get in the gym and get in the ring and ask the trainer how to deal with a given situation. That's what that's the beauty of frustration as far as I'm concerned. And many of us are wedded to fighting one another when we're frustrated instead of going doing the inside work.
Yeah, and that inside work is where the growth comes from.
Yes.
Got to be willing to do that good first. So as we start to wind down, now I want you to kind of talk about. So you wrote a book, 25 Ways to Be Loving. So tell us a little bit about that.
It I created 25 scenarios where we get to do the thing that's kind of it's almost the opposite of what we'll usually do. Where we get often triggered and how we can, instead of being triggered, go the other way and be loving. Oh,
Mm.
it's just 25 ways to be loving. It's 25 scenarios where we're often not loving, where we get to be loving. Um, that's a quick snippet.
Nice. So how can people find out more about you if they want to learn about your books and what you're doing? How can they find you?
Franklove.com. You can easily sign up on my website to receive my weekly blog. Um, so both of I'm about to go to print on the second edition of the first book, and then the 25 ways to be loving isn't even on the shelf yet. It's coming soon.
Okay, coming
Yes.
soon. So which is the book that's I don't know the hard conversation one? That's the one.
That's yes. And that was previously, so the second edition is 20 as relationship conversations you don't want to have, but should anyway. The first edition of that book was a different title on it was called How to Gracefully Exit a Relationship. And so many people came to me, and it was really about hard conversations to have up front and things to reveal about yourself, opportunities to be vulnerable, and people and how that makes exiting a relationship easier, or it prevents you from even having to exit the relationship. So many
God.
people came to me and said, this book is great, but I wanted to have a different title because it's about so much more than exiting a relationship. It's
Mm,
about the hard conversations up front and the vulnerability that we get to have. And many times when that's done, we don't have to exit a relationship.
got it. So now I want to give you an opportunity for your closing comments, whatever's on your heart to share.
Mm. I got one, and it just has nothing to do with what we've talked about today. I'm gonna write about this one. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for just having me here. But I would like to see more parents in an effort to cultivate respect for elders. I want when you are riding in the car with your children, have your children call your parents. Tell your children to give your parents a call or your spouse's parents. Just tell them to call them and see how they're doing. I really think it's important for our young people, whether they're 5, 10, 15, or 20, to connect with their grandparents, and their grandparents are going to shine. It's going to make a huge difference in that day for the well-being of that elder.
Mm,
That's what's on my heart.
that
Nothing, well, not directly related to what we just said, but indirectly in terms of creating a loving culture in our relationships.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, Frank, Number one, I think it's so cool that your last name is Love. And you're talking about and teaching about love. So I think that's kind of divinely inspired. God saying, look, I need you to talk about love because that's your name.
That's well, that's my stage name. That's not my given name.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
That's my Jay-Z to Sean Carter.
All right. But again, I do appreciate what you're doing. And again, I want to thank you for spending some time with us here on the podcast. And again, I just think this is a conversation that we as Black men need to have more often. So I appreciate you spending some time with us, sharing your wisdom and knowledge. And once again, if you want to find out more information about Frank, franklove.com. Simple, easy to remember. So this has been another episode of the Brotherhood of Kings podcast. And until next time, stay true, stand tall, and walk boldly in your kingship because authentic masculinity is power with purpose. Until next time, stay royal.